Welcome to the Busy Signal. My name is Jim, and this is my retrostalgic 80s, 90s, and early 2000s podcast. This show aims to salute all the stuff from back in the day that is now extinct or quickly going that way. On August 8th, 1986, the Transformers hit the silver screen for the very first time. In so many ways, this film is larger than life. Anybody who has seen it knows exactly what I'm talking about. So this episode, I've brought back my buddy George, and we are going to do a complete deep dive rewatch of the Transformers, the movie. Yes, that is the title, The Transformers, the movie. So, spoiler alert. If you have even the slightest interest in watching this movie and you haven't yet, pause, go to YouTube, watch the whole thing for free, come back, because we are going to spoil the whole stinking thing. From top to bottom. Autobots, roll out. George.
Hey, buddy. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Ba weep, grana weep, ninny bon.
The universal greeting. I need an Energon snack and I'll be good to go.
Absolutely. Anybody who doesn't understand, who is not going to watch the movie and still wants to listen, we'll get to this. So I would like to say that you might be one of the few people that I personally know that either matches or most likely actually surpasses my affinity for the Transformers, especially Gen 1.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm glad we live in a time where this level of nerddom is recognized and appreciated, because I was this level of nerd in the 80s, and I was shunned at school, but now I could just be myself.
Oh, absolutely. I was 5 years old when this movie came out, so I probably didn't see it in the movie theater. I'm pretty sure I rented it much later, maybe like 86, 87. Do you remember seeing this movie? Did you see it in the movie theater or was it later on VHS?
I didn't see it in the movie theater. I was not allowed to go because this was rated too high for me.
It was PG, right? PG? Somehow it's PG.
I remember on Saturday mornings, I remember seeing the trailer for this.
It is the year 2005, and a new evil threatens the galaxy in the most incredible adventure you've ever seen. Transformers, the movie. It's over, Prime. Does Prime die? Then who would lead the Autobots? And what is the secret of the monster planet?
It's so big, so exciting, you've got to see it twice to take it all in. Transformers, the movie. Rated PG, opens in theaters everywhere today.
And in the trailer, the voiceover guy, does Prime die? And you're like, what do you mean, does Prime die? And I think that's the thing. If there's one thing that sticks out to me about this movie as a kid, and even now, I've rewatched it a couple times in the last few weeks, are just how high the stakes are for this movie. You get a civilization that gets completely devoured in the first 5 minutes. You get Brawn, Ironhide, Prowl, Ratchet, Windcharger, Wheeljack all get waxed in the first 10 minutes of the movie. Yeah. We're still in the Scooby-Doo era of cartoons where you have villains of the week, like everything, there's a problem, it gets solved, and everything is exactly the same the next week. Nothing ever changes in our cartoons. There was comfort for that. So when you get this movie and they're just blowing away people right and left, you're like, what is happening? This is, in my mind, this is a better 2000s movie than it is an 80s movie. We were not ready for these kind of movies yet. This is more Game of Thrones,
right?
Than it is.
I feel like this really was a precursor to later on down the road, like the Japanimation that we have now, late 90s going into 2000s, where it's like anything can happen, good, bad, or indifferent. Like it's just like there's no catering to fans. It's like you're along for our ride. We're not here to pander to you. That is this movie.
This was stuff that did not happen in our cartoons.
Absolutely.
It's funny because doing some reading, when this came out, they were in the process of making the G.I. Joe movie, the one with Serpentor,
right.
And they were going to kill Duke in that movie. And there was such a backlash from this movie that they only had Duke be deeply
maimed,
injured, and he came back at the end. They're like, we can't kill Duke and Optimus Prime.
No, yeah. All right, so here we go. Before we get too far, brief synopsis. It's the year 2005. This movie is made in 1986, which means it was written in 1985. So they're only going 20 years into the future. Unicron is this giant planet-eating robot, and he is eating whole planets. He's massive, and he's just inhaling planets and every inhabitant on it. And this is a problem. And the Autobots see this problem, and they have to fight Unicron and defend themselves from not only Unicron, but also the Decepticons. Now, Optimus Prime has prophesied that an Autobot will rise and turn the tables in the ongoing Cybertronian war with the aid of the Matrix. Have we heard of the Matrix prior to this movie?
Yeah, the Matrix show up in the cartoon. They don't really get into the mythology of the Matrix, which is one of the great things about the Transformers, the movie. I really feel like we need to emphasize that every time we say it, is that this was really a jumping off point for Transformers. It went from being a weekly cartoon that may or may not make it to it was starting to build its own mythology here. And you got this, and you eventually get things like the Allspark and all that, where this goes from being a toy to something that has real legs to it. And I think you start to see that in this movie.
Not only is this movie huge because of its crazy action from one scene to the next, it never stops. This is a full-on crazy ride, but it is backed with voice actors that are not just voice actors. These people are massive stars at the time and have been massive stars for a long time, some of them. Let's just start Cliff Jumper. Casey Kasem?
That's a little bit out of left field, but yeah, you hear him right away.
I figured if we're going to do Transformers, I'm coming out of left field too. I'm starting with Casey Kasem.
Well, let me ask you a question. Who's a better Cliff Jumper, Casey Kasem or The Rock, who voices Cliff Jumper in Transformers Prime? I was going to say, this is a real heavyweight battle for Cliff Jumper. I didn't know he was that important of a Transformer.
I guess he is to warrant that kind of talent. I did enjoy Prime's Rock, Cliff Jumper, but we only get 5 minutes of him. So
yeah, he gets waxed quick, but they get the Brahma Bull in there right away.
I mean, obviously the next place I really want to start to really go with the stars is Peter Cullen. We have to have that voice be Optimus Prime.
I think that's one of the really special things about the Transformer franchise is Peter Cullen is the only voice of Optimus Prime. All these different iterations, whether it's the original Generation 1 cartoon or Transformers Prime or the Bayverse Transformers and even the stuff that's coming out today, it's always been Peter Cullen as Optimus Prime. And there's something so
comforting,
cathartic about hearing his voice.
And he's done it for so long and he's done it so much. I can rest easy knowing that when he, God forbid, does move on, we have AI to keep him going.
That's right. there can be no other voice. It's got to be AI.
It will be Peter Cullen forever. Moving on, we have Judd Nelson, who we get, from the Breakfast Club at the time. Really, we get a Brat Packer in here as Hot Rod and also Rodimus Prime. We'll get into that later. Moving on to another massive name, Leonard Nimoy.
Oh, this is great.
Leonard Nimoy came in to voice Galvatron, and we'll explain Galvatron later, but a massive, massive voice for a really good character.
Leonard Nimoy, for as lovable as he is on Star Trek, man, he's got some real edge to him when he does Galvatron.
He's got full-on grit and filth in that voice. It's awesome. I might be pronouncing this one wrong, but man, this guy was a staple of the 1980s. John Machida Jr., whom we know as the Micro Machines guy,
right?
Who is Blur, rightfully so. It's a perfect fit.
Yeah, I was gonna say they found the right guy.
And man, if there's any kind of music that could just trigger like somebody like our age, it would be the Unsolved Mysteries theme. And when we got Robert Stack as Ultra Magnus, all I hear is Unsolved Mysteries theme. Every time I hear his voice, I see a trench coat. I mean, he's great as Ultra Magnus.
Yeah, a little bit of stick in the mud, a little bit of
yeah.
So it's the casting in this. I know it's a cartoon movie, but the casting in this is really quite good.
I mean, I'll throw a couple more out, just two more. One, if you're familiar with Monty Python, we've got Eric Idle, and then you cannot not talk about Orson Welles.
Yeah,
this was Orson Welles of Citizen Kane. This is Orson Welles of pretty much a ton of other stuff, but he does Unicron in this. And he voiced the lines for Unicron on October 5th, 1985. He recorded those lines and died 5 days later on October 10th, 1985. Unicron is the last thing he did. He went from Citizen Kane to the very last thing he did was Transformers, and that is honorable.
Yeah, it's funny. I read that as well, and you do hear it in the when you go back and know that, and then listen to it. Like his voice is straining, but there's such richness and depth. He sounds eternal, like a giant planet-eating planet traveling around the universe probably would be. So
yeah, everything came together really perfectly for this movie. I would be chagrined if I did not mention that this is a production of Saban, who, we're getting Transformers from, and over here in America, Marvel. These are Marvel characters.
Yeah.
Why are we not getting an Avengers with Optimus Prime?
Yeah, it's funny. The Marvel actually did an 80-run comic book series. I have every issue of that, and there's Spider-Man in an issue, and there's some other like low-level Marvel characters, but you never see that anywhere else. I believe Hasbro got their full rights back, so they're not connected with the Marvel universe anymore.
It's a shame because I think some of those Avengers movies could have ended a lot differently had we had Optimus Prime and Cliff Jumper.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if you've seen this, but like they do have Transformer crossovers with other franchises. There is a Transformer Ecto 1.
I don't know how I feel about that.
There is a Transformers and Back to the Future crossover where they have the DeLorean whose name is Gigawatt, which I was like, oh, I love both of those franchises. So I was like, I might go get that at some point.
I get that. My least favorite is the 40th anniversary Optimus Prime, Target themed Optimus Prime. I hate that one so much. We are into the movie now. Unicron is destroying and obliterating harmless planets and innocent robots. And this is a brutal beginning. I mean, these robots are like, wow, trying to escape, not being able to escape. And we get that in the first scenes of this movie. These robots on this other planet are minding their own business, and now they are just being shredded. This is where the metal theme kicks in. This is where we get, the band's name is Lion. Band I've never heard of before in my life and since. But they do the most amazing thrashing hair metal version of the Transformers theme. And it's my favorite version of the theme now. It's amazing. And that's how this whole thing starts. Mass destruction and hair metal.
Yeah, you're not in Kansas anymore in the first 5 minutes of this movie. You're like, wait, this isn't good. You just see this entire civilization get wiped out. These people just get sucked into Unicron, and the goofy sound effects where he's chewing them up and stuff like that. You're like, what is happening?
Yes, it's so wild. Back over to Earth, and we've got Spike and Daniel. We see Daniel with a new Transformer.
Before you go too much further, can I interject? I wrote down some things I love from the movie and some things I hate. When you bring them up, can I throw in some of these?
Yeah.
All right. First thing I hate from this movie. I hate humans in Transformer movies. Like, we have Transformers that have human characteristics. We got Jazz who raps. We got Blaster who talks in jive. So we got all kinds of people that have human characteristics. Why do we need humans constantly in Transformers? I don't care about the humans. All they do is get Optimus Prime killed over and over and over again. Every version, whether it's comic books or cartoons or movies, humans are only there so Optimus Prime has something for him to sacrifice himself to until they bring him back to life again. The whole Spike and Daniel story, I'm just out on. I was like, there's 10 minutes of that movie that you could have devoted to Transformers I actually care about instead of humans I don't. Which brings me to my second thing. Then we can not talk about Spike and Daniel anymore in this episode. Is Spike the worst dad in movie history?
Hands down.
He's letting a adolescent Transformer babysit his kid. I don't know where Daniel's mom is during all this. And Spike's out there gallivanting on the moon trying to save. And he's like, oh, you're safe here on Earth. And Daniel spends the entire movie running for his life from Decepticons with his dad nowhere to be found. I was like, great dad in there. It was terrible.
Yep. And Daniel has to save his dad. We'll get to that. We move on to Optimus Prime and Ironhide, and they are discussing that more Energon is needed from Autobot City on Earth, and Laserbeak is spying on them. Megatron and the Decepticons are now en route to ambush the Autobots that are currently in transit. I mean, this is just like now we have a planet that's eaten other planets, and the Decepticons are still being the Decepticons. And Megatron transforms into his gun. Starstream starts unloading on the Autobots, and at least 4 to 5 Autobots are completely killed whilst we're hearing Instruments of Destruction by NRG. We've lost Wheeljack. We've lost Brawn, Prowl, Ratchet, and Ironhide. Boom. All classic characters, beloved characters, gone within 10 minutes.
Yeah, and for those of you who aren't familiar with the lore of this, is Hasbro saw this as an opportunity to kind of reset the Transformer universe. They wanted to introduce new characters, aka new toys to sell. So this was their way of getting rid of the old. And man, did they get rid of the old. Poor Brawn got his shoulder blown off, and Prowl he's got fire coming out of his eyeballs because I guess his innards are on fire.
A sick image.
and then Ironhide takes it like a champ.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, when I went back and watched the extra bonus stuff on the movie, it's pretty much explained. Transformers were brought here. They wanted to sell a toy. Hasbro wanted to sell a toy. They got this toy from Japan. They licensed it. How we get it out to people? Comic book. Okay. Now a cartoon, because we want to sell toys. We've introduced the comic book that'll go along with the cartoon. We want to sell these toys. This movie is exactly what you said. It's a reset. We want to wipe out the old inventory, and we want to sell you all new Transformers. Because up until that time, like if you look at like the Ghostbusters, how many versions of the Ghostbuster figurines are there? Like, there's the ones where their heads open and they're screaming, or the Ninja Turtles, there's Olympic Ninja Turtles. But these are all new. It's not just selling you Michelangelo, Raph, Don, and Leonardo again. It's brass tacks. Burn it all to the ground. New Transformers, which is literally what has happened here. Meanwhile, Hot Rod and Daniel are fishing. Dare, the song Dare by Stan Bush is playing, and we hear this song a lot now throughout the rest of the movie. This is like a main theme for the Transformers.
Actually, this might be my favorite song of the whole movie. I know You Got the Touch is the one we come back to. Like both the major scenes where they use this, it is really well placed within the movie.
It is such cheese, and it's so great, though. We see Cup. Cup is introduced now. He's kind of like a fatherly, been there, done that, has all the experience, all the wisdom, but in a gruff kind of tough love way.
Is it weird that I'm so much more into Cup now than when I first watched this movie?
No, because I'm totally with you on that.
Cup was annoying when I was a kid, and as a parent of 4 kids, I was like, yeah, tell him, Cup, you know what's going on.
Hot Rod was always annoying to me. That hasn't changed as I got older. Then we see Blur. We are introduced to RC. We get back into the Decepticons, and the Constructicons are forming Devastator, and Autobot City just starts getting hammered.
All right, this brings me to another thing that frustrates me about this movie. And again, we're spending time on humans when, man, that battle in Autobot City probably should have had 3 times the number of Transformers in it. You only see one of the combiners. There's no Bruticus. There's none of the Autobot combiners. My boy Omega Supreme is nowhere to be found. Like, how are you going to defend Earth without Omega Supreme? Well, first of all, if Omega Supreme was there, that battle would have been over in 5 minutes, because he would have.
That would have never happened.
Let that happen. But again, there is such a limited roster in this movie, and I realized they wanted to put the shine on all the new characters, Ultra Magnus and Springer and RC and all that. But they really, I thought, missed the boat on a lot of classic Transformers, even if you wanted to get rid of them, like to have a bigger and better fight scene there.
It's really a hopeless situation. We finally get Prime and Soundstreak and the Dinobots showing up just in time for what? Pretty much to see that everything's destroyed almost. The Dinobots attempt to take out Devastator, and we get that famous line,
Megatron must be stopped, no matter the cost.
And that is like exactly the moment where You've Got the Touch starts to play. And we get to start really seeing what Optimus Prime can do. It's almost effortless. He's just floating like a feather and just unleashing his wrath on the
reality
Decepticons.
is if we're being honest about this, we're half doing this in jest, because there's a lot of parts of this movie that are really cheesy and really, by today's standards, bad. There's a couple things they had to do well, and they actually do in this movie. Part of the reason I like this movie is there's a couple things they got to nail. You got to nail Optimus Prime. And man, when he transforms and that organ plays, you got the touch, I was
yes.
like, oh yeah, let's roll. And that one scene where you get the reflection of thrust in the front bumper of Optimus is awesome. Optimus is fantastic in that scene. And not for nothing, Optimus is the most important character in Transformers. He is the North Star of Transformers. He is basically the character in which all the other characters bounce off of. He is the pillar in the middle that shows you how evil Megatron is, or how thirsty for power Starscream is, and how reckless some of the younger Transformers are. So again, he is one of my 3 or 4 favorite characters in any genre, anywhere. Prime is fantastic.
You cannot have this franchise without Optimus Prime.
They tried.
Despite Hasbro's best attempts, as we're about to get to. So we have a standoff now with Megatron. One shall stand, one shall fall. We have the most epic battle in animated history, as far as I'm concerned. Not only do we get to see the best of Optimus Prime, but now we're getting to see the best of Megatron. He is just so dirty when he fights. He's so gutless. And it's a standoff that Megatron just plays possum. Like, oh, I'm hurt. Mercy, Optimus. You've got me, Meanwhile, his gun is right there underneath the rock that Optimus Prime can't see. But who does see it? We've got Hot Rod who sees it and is going to, in all best intentions, help Optimus Prime. And he's like, watch out, and leaps for this thing and gets in Optimus Prime's way. Prime does not have a clear shot and will not take a shot with Hot Rod there, which gives Megatron the ultimate opportunity to unload on Optimus Prime. And even though he does, that doesn't stop Optimus Prime from getting that almost fatal blow to Megatron. It's just so epic.
And this is classic Transformers. The Optimus Prime sacrifices himself for humans, for another Autobot. I mentioned the Marvel 80 issue series. Prime dies 5 separate times in 80 issues. Every single time it's sacrificing himself for someone else. Then they bring him back. He's around for 20 issues and it's like clockwork. You're like, it's about time for Prime to give himself up for somebody. This is in Transformers Prime. This is in the Transformer movies. Prime giving himself up for someone else is just classic Transformers.
Absolutely. So then now you've got a mortally wounded Optimus Prime. You've got a mortally wounded Megatron. The Decepticons are now going to retreat. They get into Astro Train, and we cut back to Prime, who's now on this table. They're watching his spark go out, and he says, "One day an Autobot shall rise from our ranks and use the Matrix to light our darkest hour." And then he passes it on as he's dying to Ultra Magnus. And it slips out of his hands and it's going to fall to the ground. You can't let the Matrix fall. So there's Hot Rod again being helpful and grabs it. And you get that crazy, rush of light. And he hands it off to Ultra Magnus and the light goes
again,
away.
This is another scene that I think they absolutely nail, much to the chagrin of like early teenage George. Like this is by far the most traumatic thing that happened to me in my childhood. Like watching Prime die, his body goes gray. It's just like, man, they really do nail this scene.
There are reports of children crying in the movie theater and upset parents about this fact. It was just nobody was ready for that.
Again, like I said, this is the 80s. This stuff didn't happen. This was like, your heroes didn't die. Scooby never gets killed. But Prime, man, like this scene would be repeated over and over again in Transformers lore. And man, it always works.
Yeah. And I think that this is a good place for us to pause. And we're going to have to come back for another episode because I have so many notes and we're like 15 minutes into this movie and we've already gone like a half hour.
If your audience can handle this level of nerddom, you're going to have to check the comments.
Like if it's only 15 minutes in to the actual movie and we've gone a half hour, like this is like a 3-parter. This is sick.
You may need to save this one for when you go on vacation or something and need to put out something from the archives.
Right. Oh my gosh. This is fantastic though, because I have so many more notes and I don't want to rush through them. I want to do this movie the justice that it deserves because this movie is hardcore and anybody who loves the movie is going to love a conversation about this movie. So George, thank you for joining me. We have so much more to get to. I got a lot to say here.
I got a few more thoughts as well. So we can come back to it anytime you want.
George, thanks again for talking Transformers. I'm sorry to cut it short, but really, man, what are we going to do? Like, we have a lot to say about this. like I said in the beginning, you have now matched or surpassed my passion for this.
Well, I was gonna say, when you got material like this to work with, what can you do?
It writes itself. I appreciate you,
buddy.
George. Thank you for coming on. I'll be talking to you. Have a good one, buddy.
You got it, buddy. Anytime.
All right, bye. Okay, wow. This movie is jam-packed with so much. I had not anticipated splitting the episode up, but I thought this would be a good place to end. Big cliffhanger, Optimus Prime has died, the Matrix has been passed on to Ultra Magnus. Find out what happens in the next episode, part 2 of the Busy Signal rewatches The Transformers, the movie. Thanks for hanging out, thanks for listening, catch you later. Once again, I'd like to say thanks for listening. And as always, you can listen to The Busy Signal everywhere quality podcasts are streamed. Hit the subscribe button to have a new episode delivered directly to your favorite device every other Friday. If you really like the show, leave a 5-star rating or a positive review on Apple and Spotify. That lets everybody else know to come check out what you already think is awesome. You can also head over to Instagram and follow the show at Busy Signalcast for even more retrostalgic content. I share a good amount of fun stuff that isn't mentioned on the episodes. While you're there, say hi in the comments. Don't be shy. And until next time, remember, reach out and touch the past.
No more, Optimus Prime! Grant me mercy, I beg of you!